right, so I think we're going to get started at 7 o'clock. People are going to still be coming in as we get going, but we've got a lot to talk about tonight. And we always run out of time, so we're going to get started. I'm just going to ask everybody to make sure you mute your phones and shut off your video if you're not a speaker on tonight's presentation. And if you are on the phone, please make sure you mute your phones. So welcome to CCI Huronia's fourth webinar on COVID-19 and how to deal with the crisis in your condo. My name is Sonia Hodis, and I'm one of the many directors of CCI Huronia and a condo lawyer, as well as your moderator tonight. If you've missed our first three webinars, you can find recordings of those webinars on our website, ccihuronia.com, under the Resource Content tab. Last week, we had several guest speakers, including the Mayor of Barrie, Jeff Lehman, the VP of Environmental Health Unit for the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, Stephen Revellato, Mario Morano from Macintosh Perry, Stefan Decane from Paul Davis, and Eric Gano from PureClean, as well as our friends from CCI Eastern Ontario chapter, Nancy Houle and Justin Tudor. Just an overview of some of the topics we discussed last week, in which you'll find in the video from last week. We talked about seasonal residents and the new Barrie Emergency Measures Bylaw. We also talked about enforcing quarantine and resources in the community, as well as domestic travel restrictions and rights. We had a session on cleaning, disinfecting, and beyond. We had a discussion about the new prompt payment legislation and delayed construction payments due to COVID. We talked about ventilation systems, and we had a fire code update. One of the topics that we didn't get to last week was the revised list of essential services, and Ashley is going to be talking about that this week. So if we had that as our cliffhanger last week, so if you came back for that, rest assured it's going to be one of our first topics that we're talking about. The Canadian Condominium Institute, CCI, is an independent nonprofit organization which was formed in 1982. We have chapters from across the country, and in Ontario alone, we have 8 chapters. CCI Huronia is one of those. You met some of our friends from CCI Eastern Ontario last week, and this week we have some guests from our sister chapter, CCI Golden Horseshoe. CCI's main objective is education, although we also advocate for owners and condos and professionals in the condo industry. We represent all those involved in condos, from owners to directors to professionals, and we encourage all these stakeholders to work together. CCI National has collected a bunch of resources on COVID-19, and on the national website, cci.ca, under the Resource Content tab, the Resource Center tab, there's a direct link on the landing page. You can get access to the CCI COVID-19 resources from across the country. You can also find our webinars on the national COVID-19 resource page as well. So that's a great place to go and check out and find some resources from across the country. Don't forget to follow CCI Huronia on Facebook to find out about our upcoming events, or visit our website at ccihuronia.com for a list of upcoming events, and also where you can register for our upcoming webinars. As of this morning, we had approximately 200 people or so registered for this webinar from all across the province and from various chapters. But I took a look at the registration list this afternoon, and I want to send out a special welcome to our viewers from Saskatoon. We've got a couple registered for tonight. And so a big shout out to our CCI North Saskatchewan chapter, which is based in Saskatoon. CCI Huronia welcomes all of you. And it's great to see that we've got participants, not just across the province of Ontario, but also across Canada. So this is our fourth webinar, and we've been living with COVID-19 for over a month now. On March 17th, Ontario government declared a state of emergency. And to date, the Ontario government has released numbers that we've had close to 8,000 positive cases and 300 deaths. And if you've been following the news today, you'll have heard that the Ontario government extended the state of emergency order under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act for another 28 days until May 12th. Schools were scheduled originally to open May 4th. That now has been postponed, and they will not be opening. And various levels of government are now talking about enforcing the orders and issuing fines for breaches of the order. So things are starting to get more serious. We also have seen that the essential services list has been restricted, and Ashley's going to give us some more details about that in a few minutes. Open houses have been banned. Short-term rentals booked after April 4th have been banned, except for very limited circumstances where somebody needs it for housing. And so far, these restrictions are staying in effect until April 23rd, that it's likely that they're probably going to be extended as well. The nice thing about these government orders is they've given condos some guidance on some of the issues that we were originally struggling with, so we'll have to see what the province does with them. We've also had our first condo case involving COVID-19 and renovations. That was released on April 3rd, 2020. Didn't take very long for us to have one of those court cases. About a week ago, the government released the COVID models and stressed the importance of people staying in their homes, and in the case of condos, staying in your units, in order to for everybody to do their own part, and only encouraging people to leave their homes for essential needs. On a lighter note, we've seen some benefits of COVID-19. It's brought wildlife back. We had a report in Aurelia of a moose taking over the roads in the neighborhoods. And I've been seeing lots of posts about people baking bread like never before, and it sounds like sourdough has made a great revival. I have to admit, I tried one this weekend, not so successful. Have to give that another try. So every week we've been coming back to you to talk to you about things that have changed and new issues that have emerged, to answer the questions that we've been receiving. And we're really having to take a look at things from a new perspective and to be flexible and innovative. And although we're not going to be baking bread tonight, we are going to go over some of these new issues and provide you with updates. Now you'll see on your screen some familiar faces. We have back with us some speakers tonight from the CCI Huronia Board of Directors. And as I've said in past webinars, their bios can be found on our website. But we also have some new guests with us tonight, and I just want to take the time to welcome them. From the Golden Horseshoe chapter, we have Maria Durden and Richard Aliyah, who are both condominium lawyers. And we also have Joe Gaitan, who is a condo director and is a member of the board of directors for Golden Horseshoe, and Nathan Helder, who is from Gelderman Landscaping Services and the past president of the Golden Horseshoe chapter. So thank you to all of our guests for joining us. We're delighted to have you with us tonight and to hear the insights and knowledge that you're prepared to share. From our board of directors at CCI Huronia, we have Vic Horwath, who is a condo director and member of our board, Blair Spinney, Ashley Winberg and Patricia Aliyah, Michelle Farley, Debbie Dale, and myself that will be speaking on various topics. The agenda was circulated in advance tonight, and there's just one change to that agenda. Nathan's topic on landscaping, we're going to move that up in the agenda, but other than that, we're going to be covering all the topics, just not necessarily in the order that was sent out. You can see in the agenda, and for those of you who haven't received it, I'll just go over it briefly. We're going to be talking about essential services and what they are now. We're going to have a specific discussion about landscaping because we've been getting a ton of questions about landscaping over the last week. We're going to have a discussion about what townhome condos should be thinking about. We're going to talk about fire safety plans and what you need to do for the various types of condos that are out there. We're going to have some positive input about what communities are doing to keep connected during COVID-19 and some creative ways to deal with common expense fees. We're also going to talk about who you need to deal with when an owner's become incapacitated or has died as a result of COVID-19. We're going to talk about emergency repairs and units and what COVID-19 is doing to our drains. And I'm going to leave that as a cliffhanger. You'll have to stick around to the end to find out what that's all about. And then we've got some questions that we're going to follow up that came through our chat line last week and that we've received by email throughout the week. So before we get started, a couple of reminders. Please mute your phones and don't unmute yourself during the session. Please also, if you're online, shut off your camera and mute your mics. We're trying to make the best recording that we can. And so to protect the bandwidth and to protect the recording, we're just asking that speakers have their cameras on and their mics on. If you're having any technical difficulties, the best idea is to end the meeting and then log back in. If you're still having problems, the invitation that you received with the login details has a phone number that you can call, and that might be, as a last resort, your best way to join the meeting again. In terms of questions, we are not taking questions live, but there is a chat box, which some people are already using. You'll see a chat button in the middle of your screen, and that'll open a chat box where you can write your questions. Just make sure that you're sending that to everyone so that we can all see the questions and the answers that are going back and forth. If we don't get to your questions tonight, we will try to get to those questions at a future webinar. Also check out our special edition COVID-19 newsletter. I know that Debbie put a link up for that already. It just got released this week, and it has a bunch of answers to questions that we've received since the initial webinar. And finally, don't forget that tonight is about sharing information and ideas. It is not professional advice. Please don't forget to contact your professionals about your very specific fact situation and what your specific condo should be doing in a certain circumstance. Your professionals are still working, they're taking calls, emails, they're doing video conferencing. So make sure that you reach out to them and get the professional advice that you need in order to protect yourself and to protect your condo. Just a reminder that the protection for directors under Sections 37 of the Condominium Act, that provides you with protection if you obtain an opinion from a professional. Tonight's webinar is not that type of an opinion, and therefore won't provide you with that type of protection that Section 37 is intended to give you. So please reach out to your professionals. Also, I just want to make sure that people who are watching this webinar at a later date are aware that the information is correct as of today's date, which is April 14th, 2020. As things are changing rapidly, the information today provided today may not be relevant or applicable at a future date. So please, again, check with your professionals to make sure that the information you have when you're making your decisions is current. Also, please be advised that any references to the Condominium Act or other legislation during this webinar are references to Ontario legislation. So without further ado, let's get started with Ashley. And everyone is anxiously waiting, Ashley, for you to explain to us what this new essential list means and what's happening with respect to maintenance and construction in terms of the revised list.
Okay. So under the provincial order that was issued by the province on April 3rd, the following are essential services that are relevant to condominiums that are permitted to continue to operate. So telecommunications, this would be relevant to a condo if your building has a Rogers antenna on the premises. Also, movers and real estate agents are also essential services. However, as Sonia mentioned, open houses are prohibited. Residential construction projects that commenced on or before April 4th can continue regardless of the nature of the project. So this means any in-suite renovations that commenced on or before April 4th, as well as any common element work that commenced on or before April 4th, regardless of the nature of the work. Property management is also an essential service, as well as security, parking enforcement, and concierge staff. Pest control and cleaning and janitorial services are also essential, and that would include window and carpet cleaning. However, it might be in the corporation's best interest just to try and hold off on window and carpet cleaning until it is absolutely necessary. As Nathan Helder from Gelderman Landscaping Services will be discussing shortly, landscaping services that are essential to ensure the safety and security of the property are also permitted under the order. And any in-suite or common element maintenance or repair work that is strictly necessary to manage the safety, security, operation, and sanitation of the property. Now, determining what constitutes maintenance or repair work that is quote unquote strictly necessary to manage the property and maintain the safety, security, and sanitation and operation of a property is really something that can only be answered on a case-by-case basis. So it is advised that if any corporations have questions regarding perhaps anticipated maintenance or planned maintenance and repair work that has not yet commenced, that they contact their professional advisors, perhaps their solicitor or their engineer, for guidance in that regard. However, generally speaking, the following are some examples of work that would not be permitted under the provincial order because they are not required in order to ensure the safety and security and what have you of the property. Repair and maintenance work that really only serves an aesthetic purpose. So this could be perhaps corridor refurbishment work that was anticipated to commence in the spring or the summer, and any landscaping services that really serve only an aesthetic purpose. That would include the planting of new shrubs, new flowers, and so forth. With respect to landscaping in particular, I know CCI Huronia has received a number of questions on this particular topic, as have I. In my opinion, as a solicitor, is that I think condominium corporations should take a conservative approach when interpreting the wording of the provincial order, and in doing so, strictly interpret the wording. And based upon a strict interpretation of the provincial order, it's my opinion that the landscaping services that I'll be listing shortly are permitted under the provincial order because they are necessary to ensure the safety and security of a residential condominium property. And these services would include landscaping treatments that are essential to reduce the transmission of disease through pests like mosquitoes or ticks or fleas, regular weeding, grass cutting, and litter and waste removal, because an unkept green space can potentially lead to personal injury, property damage, or property damage, as well as attract trespassers. Snow removal and de-icing, hopefully that won't be necessary in the immediately near future. Leaf removal, as well as the pruning and trimming and removal of bushes, shrubs, trees, or plants, because if these plants are left unkept, then that could lead to potential personal injury or property damage. And as I mentioned, it's my opinion that non-essential landscaping services that would not be permitted would be landscaping services that are purely of an aesthetic nature, that only serve an aesthetic purpose, like the planting of new beds, new flowers, new trees, so on and so forth. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Nathan Halder from Gelderman Landscaping Services to provide his professional opinion as a landscaping service provider as to his take on the provincial order and what his team is doing when they provide essential landscaping services.
Nathan?
Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, so it's been a, we're in a crisis, and this is where I believe leaders are born, in crisis situations. And so for a landscape company like myself, we making informed decisions is the most important part of all this. And so, we reach out to our association, Landscape Ontario, but we have to remember that Landscape Ontario is not a regulatory body like the Law Society. They're advisory. And so they, when you go to Landscape Ontario, you look at them and say, okay, what's important or what's essential? And I've learned that what my version or my viewpoint of essential is, it doesn't matter. It's what the province has stated. And so for Gelderman Landscape Services, number 20 of the list and number 1 of the list, so property management service is essential. Number 1 would suggest that businesses that supply other essential businesses are also able to work. And under the maintenance side of things, so, in this time of the year, God has created the grass to grow, and it will grow regardless of COVID or not. And so shrubs and bushes and grass, all that type of work is necessary to maintain. Otherwise, it's going to be an unsightly mess. And so for my business, I'm convicted that we are allowed to perform property maintenance services to keep properties safe and clean. And that is, like Ashley was talking about, those kind of things. So power sweeping, cleaning up the debris. There's a lot of debris out there from the winter yet, and to keep the property safe, we need to clean that up. Maintenance of pruning, shrubs and trees, stuff like that. But what my business, half my business is shut down. So our whole landscape construction teams, they're not working. Everybody's been laid off. We are selling projects and getting POs for projects, but we can't start doing them. So this is annual plantings, retaining walls, new shrubs, plantings, all those kind of things is all on hold for now. So again, the question is, do I think it's essential? Well, pre-COVID, if anybody heard the word essential, we'd be thinking police and ambulance services only. We would not be thinking LCBO in the beer store. So my personal impression or belief is what essential is. It doesn't matter. It's what the law states, and the law can't be listing all services because it'd be 1,000 pages long. And so as my company, I'm convicted that my interpretation is as such. We're confident with it. Our clients are extremely happy that we're performing cleanup services. And when the grass needs to be cut, we'll be cutting it as well. But like I said, we won't be doing the other operations. And so the big thing is that for landscape contractors, you either are convicted either way. If you sit in the middle and don't know what to do, you do nothing. And so some contractors decide to shut down and wait, and they're waiting still. And they've also said that they can't wait forever because the vegetation keeps growing. And so for Gelderman, we've decided to take care of our properties, the spring cleanup, and move forward with that.
Thanks,
And
Nathan.
are there any types of protocols that you've asked your team to employ in order to try and prevent the transmission of COVID?
Yeah, so safety has to be number one, right? So we've changed on all our health protocols. So we have one person in the truck. So the crew leader picks up the truck, drives to the site. Every day, that truck gets wiped down. All the staff members drive to the site themselves, and we maintain social distancing at all times. The beauty about working outside is it's pretty easy to do social distancing. You're working on your condo property, there's lots of acres usually. That's not a problem for us. And so we're sanitizing the trucks every day. The staff are, we also are doing Zoom meetings daily with our staff. So at 5:30 every day, we give an update with all our staff to keep them informed of what's going on. Our sales and management teams are working remotely, so nobody's working in our office. Everybody's remote. And so, we're learning that, a lot of the washrooms are shut down. So we've actually partnered with our customers and actually brought a portable washroom on site for our staff to use because they can't go to Tim Hortons anymore to use the bathroom, right? So for contractors, this becomes a problem, just like the trucking industry is experiencing that too. So we've had to think outside the box by keeping people safe, by providing essential services for our staff. At any point, if our staff don't want to work, we're okay with that. But the majority of our staff do want to work, and they're excited and happy to work outside.
Thanks, Nathan. So based on what Nathan and Ashley saying, I think it's about interpreting what's strictly necessary, and that's going to be a case-by-case basis that you're going to have to evaluate. All right, so moving on to our next topic, townhouses. We've had a lot of questions about townhouses specifically. So Maria Durden is going to address what townhouses should be thinking about, especially in terms of social distancing. Maria?
Hi, thanks, Anya, and thanks to the board for the invitation to participate tonight. It's very much appreciated. So yeah, unlike high rises, townhouses are a bit different. Their units aren't stacked. They have separate entrances versus the central lobby area that you see in high rises. Most of them don't have amenities like gyms. Some have pools, but not too many of them. And a lot of them look much closer to a freehold home than a high rise. Some even look like a standalone home, and they don't even know they purchased into a condo. We've unfortunately probably all had that kind of incident in the past. But with that illusion comes the false sense of protection from infection of things such as COVID-19, because there's just more space. The main one that I would like to touch upon today is the requirement to physically distance ourselves from each other, which is something that we've all been repeating, I think, daily, numerous times to our clients, and also to our own individuals that we work with. So quickly, in the context of a townhome, the following areas are the ones that are of risk, where physical distancing may be an issue and you would like to put your mind to as a director or property manager. So number one is a mail. Most townhouse complexes have a central outside mailbox location that all unit owners access. Unlike a high-rise where it's usually a room where you can say one person at a time enter and exit, and you can clean it pretty well on a daily basis. So what do you do with townhouses? What we've been seeing is that townhomes mark on the pavement or on the asphalt with an X or any kind of mark that's temporary, showing 2 meters apart for individuals to stand once they access their mail, and to wait, if there's a person there, to wait till they leave to go after them. Also to not socialize or linger in this area, which is kind of counter to what we're usually saying to owners of, you know, create a community and talk and get to know each other. Not to say that you're to be rude, but to be mindful of the distances and understanding that that's why people are kind of staying away and hopefully not lingering. The next is the exclusive use garden area. So with the warmer weather, which we're not getting here in Hamilton where it's actually snowing right now, actually, so we will use those services. But with the warmer weather, we are going to see owners go outside on their patios, their decks, their verandas, do some more gardening, put out decorative features. So residents need to be mindful of the size of their green space and the location of it. How close is it to your neighbors? Do you have a privacy fencing actually installed between units? Because we know that the maximum is 5 individuals at any one time in one area, unless it's a family. So consider this, there's 3 units, 5 individuals on each unit, all outside, all at the same time. That's a 15-person party. That was unintended. So just be mindful who's out there, who's using it, how close are you, and are you indirectly in breach of the physically distancing requirement. Also have owners contracted with someone like Nathan to put in a deck or any kind of feature on the outside of their unit after April 4th. If so, something that would very likely have to be put to a stop or delayed. Perhaps it's canceled, hopefully not. And the cost of any cancellation or delay would be at the owner's expense, not the corporation's. So just being aware of, is there any work planned or hoping to be planned by owners in their exclusive use areas. 2 more, parking. Some townhouses have a communal parking area. Some have parking right next to their garages if they do have garages. If it's a communal area, residents need to be mindful when they enter and exit their cars. So if there's someone entering into the car next to theirs, perhaps wait to go to yours once they leave, and vice versa. If you have extra parking areas or spaces, which does happen sometimes, you could try to mark out every other parking space so that cars don't park next to each other, so people, again, are distancing more. Also, if it's an option, perhaps parking on the road, if there's no bylaws that prohibit it or there's no limitations. Lastly, garbage. Most townhouse condos have a rule, something along the lines of you can't put out your garbage earlier than 7 p.m. on the night before pickup the next morning. Very typical rule. It's there to create order there so you don't put out your garbage 2 days before and it stays there. So perhaps maybe create a schedule. Units 1 through 20 puts out their garbage between 5 and 7. Units 21 to 30 between 7:30 and 8. Something that works for the majority of owners. Again, unless it's a rule, you can't really necessarily impose it. But perhaps make it a policy to try to encourage that or discourage that backlog of people going out and, again, socializing and talking, being in close parameters. So all in all, how do you ensure that people are aware of these issues in townhouses? As always, in condo, it's communicate. Send notices, post notices on the central mailbox, or if there's a bulletin board, put it up there. Update your condo website to advise them of these policies. It's been mentioned before, is it a time to pass new rules or amend rules to accommodate COVID-19? I don't know, may not be the best course of action because you don't want a requisition meeting to happen and then that creates a whole other list of issues. But policies do go a long way in establishing protocol and seeking compliance as well. But above all, you have to be reasonable and understand that this is a very difficult time for many people, mentally, emotionally, financially. So I think condos really have to try to encourage cooperation and just ask from their owners and residents to use their best efforts to comply.
Thanks, Maria, and thanks for giving us a perspective from the townhouse condo perspective. We've had lots of questions on that, and thanks for joining us tonight. Michelle, can you give us a quick lowdown on fire safety plans and what low-rise, high-rise, and townhomes should be doing with respect to those?
Yes, thank you, Sanya. Where is the line drawn for essential services when it comes to your duty to implement the fire code? Should you test your fire alarm system? Yes. Should you go in suite? Maybe suite entry can be deferred. Should you check fire doors throughout your building? Absolutely yes. Should you test the suite fire doors? Maybe that can also be deferred, unless a resident complains that theirs is damaged or not functioning. And in that case, you may have to arrange repairs for that particular unit. Should you undertake major life safety system capital expenditures? Yes, if the systems are not functional, causing trouble, or if it's strongly recommended by your service providers or professionals. But no, if it's simply a reserve fund line item due to the end of life anticipated of that particular product, it can be postponed until later. So where's the line of what is essential when implementing your fire safety plan? The Fire Marshal's Office and local fire departments have put out communications saying that maintaining fire code compliance during COVID is essential, and this is the law. 80 to 90% of your building's fire safety plan is unchanged and can be implemented as usual. In low-rise residential buildings, you have varying life safety systems depending on your building size. The systems may include a fire alarm or smoke alarm system, emergency lighting units or generators, and include fire doors and fire separations. Your staff is generally trained to inspect the life safety systems daily, weekly, and monthly, and have semi-annual responsibilities undertaken and recorded in a logbook by staff. They may be able to take on additional tasks where trained to do so, as monthly and annual responsibilities are typically undertaken by contractors and where feasible still continue to be so. Your contractor must conduct the annual tests, but may assist the staff with the fire drills. So these procedures can continue, but may have to be altered temporarily by developing reasonable processes that will allow for safety modifications where in-suite inspection is required that can possibly be postponed to later. Fire drills may be restricted to essential staff only, and residents' participation can be postponed. Procedures may have to be further adapted where COVID is active in your condo or contractors are unavailable, which we're seeing happen in some municipalities. High-rise residential buildings are more complex. They have more extensive fire alarm systems and include emergency voice communication. They may have emergency lighting units and generators, and they have more fire doors and fire separations. These can't be propped open. They have to be properly cleaned and maintained. Additionally, high rises have Fire Code Part 7 requirements of the emergency voice communication, firefighter elevators, and smoke control, plus quarterly testing of these systems and quarterly fire drills in the buildings, which again, in some cases, your staff can be trained to do some of. Your fire safety plan should depict the requirements, and you should have an engineered stamp fire safety plan appendix of your Part 7 testing requirements. And it may also include coordinating fire alarm, HVAC, and elevator contractors, and you may need help to coordinate that safely. High-rise provisions can be modified due to the specific conditions in your specific building. In townhome communities, as we heard here, they differ slightly, and there's primarily two types when it comes to the fire code. Those with common egress, shared hallways, stairwells, corridors that have common life safety systems, and these should be continued to be tested. They also will have condominiums with no common egress, hallways, and stairwells. So you may simply have to advise your residents to check their own smoke alarms, CO detectors, and clear their dryer vents. So review your fire safety plan responsibilities and know your obligations. Look for the gaps and develop interim measures that are suitable to your specific building. Keep records of everything you're doing. This of all times is a critical time to keep your communities fire safe and prevent fires, and especially to communicate what you're doing to your residents. You may need help from your service providers and professionals. To reach out to them, they're here to help. But remember, you're not alone. With today's constant challenges, our clients are having difficulties making decisions. Try to plan for this month and for next month at least. The life safety of your building is essential, and we all can help. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And I think a good message there for everybody to remember is to document, because that might be key down the road. So thanks for reminding everybody about that. All right, so to bring a little bit of levity to the situation and to hear some positive news, we've brought some condo directors who are also board members of various CCI chapters to talk to us about what their communities are doing to stay connected. And so let's start off with Joe from the Golden Horseshoe chapter. Joe, can you tell us what your community is doing to stay connected during these times?
Okay, so first a little context. We're a 21-story, 186-unit condominium in Burlington. We've had a very vibrant social fabric in this building almost since turnover. So that sets a really great base for being able to move forward in a situation like we are in today. So one of the things, though, in a building like ours is elevators. So in one sense, they're a curse in that you don't want to get into an elevator when someone else is there. So what we've done there just is reminding people to enter that as a family unit. And this also, and we normally wouldn't do this, as post things in the elevator because we like to keep them tidy and looking nice. So we have multiple postings there just to kind of remind people of all the things they should be doing to stay safe and self-distancing, etc. So what we did, the social committee came up with this idea, and so on a daily basis, we have a balcony shutout. So every unit has a balcony. So at 6 p.m. every day, we get out there and people are, have whistles and shouting and clapping. And so part of this, of course, is to recognize the people who support us. And we've had bagpipes playing. We've had all sorts of great things. And it's amazing how all of a sudden, and this is a true situation for me, is that there's a neighbor who moved in. It was kind of high in the hallway type conversation. All of a sudden, we're talking over our balconies. And we're not singing Italian songs because it's only a few of us know the language. The other thing, our committee has recognized the front line. They bought them pizzas and things of that nature. I belong to a wine club, and we've now used Zoom conferencing to have a Zoom. I guess what we're doing is last week we reviewed Ozark. Next week we'll review another. It's I forget what it's, Unorthodox. So we get together, there are 10 of us, and we just chat over Zoom. So that's another great idea for people who don't do that. We also have, I guess we have each floor is a community. So a lot of people on each floor are helping each other out, delivering groceries or supplies or newspapers or packages. And/or we use our security people to do that in some instances where people are self-isolating. So we are keeping our distance and we're keeping the spirit up. We published a newsletter that was specific to COVID, sort of reminding people of the background of what we're doing and the importance of it. And some of our more vulnerable people, because we have people who are recovering from leukemia. One person had a transplant, and we want to make sure people understand one of the reasons we're doing this is to protect our own communities. So what else? I'm trying to look. Of course, it's great to see the dog walkers out there. They have a great opportunity to go out, and that brings the community together as well. And they stand across the street and wave at us, and while we're doing our balcony shutout. And we're also fortunate to have video display units in each of our our P1, P2 in our lobby, so we can also communicate things that way and keep people abreast of all the things that kind of keep a community together.
Thanks, Joe. So it sounds like even though we're social distancing, that doesn't mean we're not being social anymore.
Yes.
Okay, Vic, what are you doing in your community? Vic, are you there?
How do you hear me?
There you go.
There we are. Got wised up. We are the villages of Leacock Point up in Aurelia, and we are group of 6 condominiums with 107 units, and in total, and it's just that it was built in phases, and that's why we are organized the way we are. About just around the time that the province was putting in some rules, and everybody was wondering what we were going to do, one of our very senior persons came out on our front porch with a cowbell, and she started to ring her cowbell. And from there, somebody else came out with a bell. And it seems, I guess, that I have a number of teachers that are retired here, and they all got bells when they graduated or when they left the classroom. So did you get the pictures that I sent?
Yeah, actually, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I'm going to share one of the videos that you sent, Joe, because I think it summarizes what your community is doing.
It's Vic.
Or sorry, Vic. Sorry, Vic.
Whoops. Okay, and you can see we just get out. We have a series of streets, and at 11:30 every day, rain or shine, this gang, the bells start ringing off the front porch, and out they come, and they come from other streets. We have a number of streets here, and we're going to turn this around. And when you look at this, you're going to see a couple on their front porch, and he's our ukulele guy. There he is. That's Nels, and he plays the ukulele, and they sing along, and that's it. Now, that's basically most of it. But on Easter Sunday, the ladies all put on their Easter bonnets and tramped up and down the street and had lots of laughs and whatever. So we are kind of a social group here that we have a number of parties, which we're not having now. And this was one way to overcome that. So it brings you together and it keeps you apart at the same time.
Thanks, Vic. Thanks to both Vic and Joe for sharing those ideas. Looks like you guys are still having lots of fun. So as I talked about in the beginning, I talked about having to be flexible and creative, and Richard Aaliyah is going to talk to us about some creative ways to deal with common expense fees. Richard?
Thanks, Sonia. Just to set the stage, I want to just clarify for everyone, common expenses they're not a penalty or a fine. They're not part of a commercial venture. Condos are not for profit. These are your cash flows so you can operate day by day, carry out all your duties and responsibilities. And if somebody doesn't pay, you've got a problem. And that's where the lien comes in as a really effective and efficient tool. And the reason it is effective and efficient is the super priority that comes with it. It just ranks ahead of everybody short of government. And the lien is automatic. You don't have to do anything for it to happen. As soon as somebody doesn't pay, it's there. And because of the super priority, because of what the Act says, it actually puts the mortgage in default automatically. But what you've got to do is perfect it. That's where the cost comes in. And perfect it by registering the certificate of lien on title at the land registry office. And there's a legal process to that. And the reason the legal process is there is really to balance all of the various interests at stake. You know, you've always got the interest of the non-paying owner, the interest of the condo, you got the interest of all the other owners who are going to have to pick up the tab if common expenses get written off. You've got all the third-party interests, which have to be considered. These are the banks who hold the first, second, third mortgages. And yeah, we're seeing third mortgages more and more these days. You've got all the other claims. There's a case from the fall which involved a family law claim, a spousal claim on the house, which came into play. So you really want to do that. What we don't want to do in the process is interrupt these interests, in any way interfere with the interests. We don't want to go to court. We don't want to fight over priority. We don't want to waste money that we can't collect, and we certainly don't want to write off common expenses. So some ideas, and I want to start by pushing back on some ideas which are floating out there. The first is the common expense holiday. We're hearing about banks giving mortgage interest holidays, which is lovely. but they're in the business of giving mortgages. Interest is their revenue. Again, as I said at the beginning, it's not the case for condos. Condos are not for profit and they need the cash flow. Second is the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act order about extending limitations. Ask 5 lawyers what this means for condo, the 3-month limit. They get 5 different answers. And the bottom line is nobody knows. I don't want to be acting for the condo that's going to go to court on this. And I don't want to act for the condo that's going to be writing off common expenses if it goes the wrong way. So rather just be safe. There's no minimum time within which to register common expenses. So stick to the 3-month limitation. The third one I want to push back on are these creative agreements that we're hearing about to allow an owner extended time. Well, bottom line is we can't contract out of the act. It's not possible. We also can't interfere with all those other interests which are at stake and are at play here. So let's forget about the creative agreements. So what does work? Rejig your budget, especially if you've got a common expense surplus, an operating balance surplus. Rejig your budget. There's nothing that stops you from doing a part-year budget in a condo. It would apply to everybody. You could do even a common expense holiday for a couple of months. But a caution here, this is a pay less now, pay more later idea. And we don't know what later means yet in the current environment. We don't know how long this is going to go, how long it's going to go on, what the long-term impact on the economy is going to be. Similarly, with funding the reserve, I've heard some put forward ideas about let's just not fund the reserve temporarily, use the money to reduce common expense payments in the short term. Well, first, that's arguably against the act. But secondly, again, it's a pay less now, pay more later. If you're going to consider changing the funding plan of the reserve, do it with your reserve fund planner, get it signed off on at that level. Otherwise, you could be creating some other issues. Some ideas I really like, those voluntary warning letters at the get-go. If you're not doing them, do them. If you're doing them already, strengthen them. If you're only sending them to the owner, send them to the mortgagees. You should know in your condo's records who the mortgagees are. So get the mortgagee involved at the get-go. Encourage owners to provide a part payment early. All right, try to avoid that 3-month window from closing. All right, but make sure the owner knows and everybody knows that that payment is going to apply against the oldest common expenses, not the current. We want to keep the balance current going forward. One idea that I really like, and it's really worked well for us, is getting the third parties involved as early as possible. So typically a file will come to us at the Form 14 stage or the notice of lien stage. That's the earliest part of the legal process. And the Act already says we've got to send out notice to the owner and to the owner's address as it shows up at the land registry office. The idea of only sending it to the name and address in the condo's register changed about 4 years back. It's got to be as per the records of the land registry office. So we're already doing a limited title search. So why not go, then there's the case from the fall, Ching and Carlton 223, which is the one that underscored the need to send it to the spousal claim under the Family Law Act. So that's making us do an in-depth title search right at the get-go. Why not take it the next step, find out who the banks are, send the notice requirement to the banks right at the Form 14 stage by registered mail. Right? Since we started this in the fall, we're collecting 2/3 of the files before we register a lien, which is phenomenal. And that's saving overall cost to the owners. Now add to that, why not ask the banks for a couple more months payment? Right? We already see a cyclical lien process for some units. We're seeing other owners who just can't pay for new reasons. The banks know this. All right, so when you contact the banks, putting them on notice, telling them the owner's in arrears, ask them for an extra couple of months. Why not? We've got one bank already doing this, which I really like. Paying it forward. Another idea, the late payment interest. Right? Condos can't lend money. They never have been able to. So the late payment interest rate in the bylaws is set high. All right? I like to see 18 to 24%. But it's a deterrent. It's set as a deterrent for owners that don't pay. There's nothing stopping boards from waiving the interest or reducing it if it's going to encourage prompt payment. All right, particularly in these times. Moving away from aggressive collection procedures. Some condos which had a history of owners carrying balances might have moved up the lien period from 3 months to 2 months to 1 month. all right, move it back. All right, but don't go beyond the 3 months. You can't extend that window.
You've got one more for us, Richard?
Pardon me?
You have one more good tip for us?
I have two more.
Okay.
One, work with your lawyer to reduce the legal fees. All right, if an owner is going to pay us, I've got no problem lowering it. All right, and I don't think any other lawyer would mind that if it's going to reduce the work. The last one is delay advance in the file. I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. When a lien gets registered, it says the act says you can enforce it in the same way as a mortgage, right? Which is great. And the difference, though, is a mortgage is expected to stay there. A condo can't lend money. So at some point, a condo is going to need to enforce, but you can certainly extend the time a little bit as long as it's across the board. And I'll stop there. Sorry, Sonia.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Richard. I love your idea about getting more money from the mortgage company when you're talking about liens with them anyway. It's a great way for owners to add it to their mortgage and fund it that way. Great idea, Richard. Thanks a lot. Okay, so we're going to move on to now just talking very briefly about who you deal with when a unit owner has died or is incapacitated. I'm going to talk about this topic. I just really want to highlight, and we've talked about this topic in some of our other seminars, especially when we've dealt with sort of aging populations in condos and issues that we have to think about. I just want to remind everybody that if you run into a situation where an owner, either due to COVID or any other reason, either becomes incapacitated, which means they don't have the mental capacity to make decisions, or unfortunately dies, you have to make sure you're dealing with the right people. Technically, you need to deal with the owner, and so the only person you can deal with in replace of the owner is their legal representative. So in terms of when somebody has died, the legal representative is the estate trustee. Now, that estate trustee can either be named in a will, or if it's not named in a will, it's going to have to be appointed by court order. The document that you're looking for is either the will, and if you're just going to rely on a will, you definitely want to get some legal advice to make sure you're relying on the right will, or the legal document that's issued by the court is called a certificate of appointment of estate trustee with a will, or a certificate of appointment of an estate trustee without a will. And that will tell you who the person is that is legally able to represent the estate. I also recommend that you do a property search to make sure you're very clear on who actually is the owner or owners of the property and how that property is held. Property can be held as tenants in common or as joint tenants, and that will have an impact, especially in estate matters, in terms of who has authority to deal with that property. Now, if somebody is incapacitated, that means they're still alive, but they just may not have the ability to make decisions at a certain point in time. If for some reason you need to deal with the owner and the owner is incapacitated, who you're looking for is the power of attorney. And the power of attorney is appointed through a legal document. And in Ontario, we have two of them. There's a power of attorney for property and a power of attorney for personal care. A lot of people make an assumption that it's automatically the spouse or the children that are the power of attorney for property, and that is not the case in Ontario. You either appoint a power of attorney for property through this document, and if you don't have one, then the PGT's office, which is the public guardian's office, becomes the power of attorney until the guardian of property has been assigned, either through a process that the PGT's office does or through a court application. So just because someone's incapacitated, don't automatically assume that you can deal with the wife or the children on legal matters concerning the unit. You may be dealing with the public guardian's office. If there is a power of attorney in place, then you can deal with the power of attorney. But again, you may want to get some legal advice to make sure that you're dealing with the right person, and that's the last valid power of attorney. So just a couple things that I want to just highlight to make sure that in case you find yourself in this situation, you know who you should be dealing with. Search title, make sure you're dealing with the executor of the estate, and verify who the power of attorney for property is. And if you're not sure, get legal advice, because this area of the law can get complicated at times. All right, Patricia, you're going to talk to us about how to deal with emergency unit repairs.
Thanks very much, Sonia. So at this time, we still have our duties under the Condominium Act, and the corporation's duties are to maintain and repair the property, and they're rooted in both the Act and external legislation. Occupier's liability requires that we maintain the property in a safe manner, and Section 178990 of the Act specifically highlight obligations which are refined by the declaration. The introduction of COVID-19 into the new normal means that these duties have to be fulfilled within the context of managing the virus while conducting repairs and maintenance. There is no statutory hiatus. Accordingly, we're recommending that boards critically think about how to structure their analysis around repair and maintenance in the context of essential work. The new Essential Services Order of the Ontario government that Ashley spoke about helps frame this. With this said, boards cannot operate as they once did because the objective is to crush the curve, and that is everyone's obligation, including boards. Section 20 of the order specifically talks about maintenance, repair, and property management services, strictly necessary to manage safety, security, sanitation, and essential operation of the actual residential property. What this means is that not every piece of maintenance, repair, and property management services will be considered essential. So while it is important to appreciate that there are essential components to the functions that are undertaken, every function now has to be assessed as to the level of risk that's being undertaken and how it's going to be executed. I see more property management companies, for example, actually working remotely. I also see landscaping contracts not being able to be fully executed. Critical thresholds are to be defined, and it has to be defined by safety, security, sanitation, and essential. So what we're telling boards to do is now proactively think, make sure your minutes reflect what you're thinking about. And once you've identified what the repairs are that are going to be conducted, you have to identify emergency, urgent, and would have to get done, but not urgent right now. So generally what you have to ensure is that the dwelling is fit for habitation and not in a condition so as to be dangerous to health or safety of the occupants. Then the boards should look at actually dividing down what are the areas that are of concern. For example, roofs, plumbing, electrical, heating, cooling systems. These are all things that have to be identified. Why? Because when you're looking deeply into these and you have an emergency, for example, a plumbing emergency, you need to be able to call on a list of suppliers immediately. But these days, it's not just any supplier. So what you should be doing is you actually should have already identified those suppliers that are able to provide evidence of a system of compliance with COVID-19 protocols in the implementation of their work. This is critical in order to understand how the work will be affected. Why do you need to understand this now? Because when the emergency arises, you need to respond immediately. And it's no longer that a supplier just has to have WSIB clearance and a license. It has to be that the workers are actually COVID-free as well. So what would be great is suppliers, if you could also be tracking your employees so that you can evidence that there has been no evidence of exposure or infection in the last prior 14 days before you're called. What I liked about Nathan's feedback was that they have protocols to make sure that social distancing is actually maintained and that their trucks, for example, are safe and not an area to carry the virus. So at a minimum, the protocol should also include a measure of ensuring that unit owners are safe from the workers that come to the unit, that there's a method of disinfecting and cleaning the area that is impacted by the repair, and that all personnel coming in are wearing proper equipment. The corporation, in advance of the attendance at the unit, should have conducted a questionnaire with each the unit owner and the contractor employee to ensure that any risks are identified in advance thereof. So it's a balancing here now. It actually goes both ways. And while some communities may dismiss this as not as important, please remember this virus doesn't know any geographical boundaries, and community spread in smaller communities will put undue pressure on healthcare systems. The obligation to protect flows both ways, and the corporation through property management and the board play a critical role in protecting everyone. So we have seen a lot of clients of ours that need to put in place the right type of questionnaires. Asking too much information is not appropriate, but also making sure that you have an information policy in place is also critical. You do not have the right to collect, use, or disclose information unless you have permission. So these are also important steps that have to be put in place to make sure you can use the data. And the risk of contracting the disease does potentially create liability for the corporation if it hasn't managed its risk properly. So it should be discussed by the corporation with legal counsel when it's considering what obligations and the duties of the corporation are in the event of emergency maintenance and repair. But right now is the time to identify risk and also ensure that protocols are in place to manage the risk so that you can minimize the risk to your community as a whole. Thanks very much, Sonia.
Thanks, Patricia. Safety is key at the end of the day. That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Debbie, tell us about COVID and our drains. Why on earth do we need to worry about our drains during COVID?
Oh my goodness, this is quite a subject. Thank you, Sonia, for making me do this tonight. Hi, everyone. So the journey through this pandemic has been really quite a challenge and interesting. It's presented a lot of day-to-day issues in the property management field, and the issues have been just as unexpected as the coronavirus itself. One tale of woe relates to the ever-handy and consumer-friendly Lysol wipes. I'm just gonna, everybody knows what these are. This is not an ad for Lysol wipes, I might add. So a resident called my office and she was reporting a really strange occurrence. She shared she had been awoken in the middle of the night with this gurgling noise. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. She's a long-term resident. It's definitely not a mental health issue. And she hadn't taken a sleeping medication. And we had a funny chat because we get along quite well. And she said, Debbie, I got up, I got out of bed, I went running around my condo. I could not find the noise. And as quickly as it started, it stopped. I thought, well, I'll make a note of that. Thanks very much. Went on about the rest of my afternoon. I thought about 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. There was another resident in the same building. And she said, hey, Deb, I've had this weird thing going on in my condo for a part of today. And I was in the shower and I got out of the shower and like my toilet is gurgling and bubbling. And I don't know what that means, but it doesn't look normal to me. Do you think it's anything to pay attention to? Of course, at that moment, I thought, oh, wonderful. Do we have some type of a backup? Well, within 10 minutes, I had calls from other residents in the building, and it was literally a property management scramble to try and handle what turned into a complete catastrophe. I dashed to our trades list and found the best plumber around, got him in there with a camera, in they came. In the midst of all of this, we were sending out a notice to all the folks in this building and saying, please don't use your water, don't flush your toilet, turn off your dishwasher. If you're having a shower, get out of the shower. If you've run a bath of water, don't drain the water. Just stop everything you're doing. If you've got to wash your hands, put a pot in your sink and make do with that for now. Oh, and by the way, we'll get back to you. Of course, a couple of residents thought this was completely unacceptable, as did I. And in came the call for the porta potties. So the porta potties arrived, and we had to, of course, make sure that they were at least 2 meters apart from each other. So the visitors' parking area was promptly decorated with porta potties. Then the scramble was on for a way to wash hands, disinfect them after use, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, nightfall came and visitors' parking wasn't that well lit. Thank God. The plumbers got there along with another company with the video equipment, and lo and behold, what did they find? They found in the main drain of the building so many wet wipes and pieces of paper towel that it had clogged the system. And I can tell you it wasn't pleasant for anybody living in the building. It was a mass panic. I think really it's just a sign that people are home so much right now. They're flushing everything and anything. They want it out of their apartments. I get it. I want it out of my house too. But we need to think about what we're flushing because the systems are just not built to manage this much material. So the moral of the story, of course, is please think about what you're flushing during COVID-19. And some of it doesn't need to be flushed.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Debbie. I guess people are going to be revising the signs that are going out to owners about what they're warning them about COVID-19 issues. probably a good thing to be telling owners that they should be careful about what's going down those drains. All right, so we're running a little bit over, but I want to get to two questions that we received through the week. Blair, we got one question about financial statements and whether if your AGM is postponed, should you be delivering the approved financial statements to the owners anyway? Can you take that one, Blair?
Sure. So first of all, if you look at the Act says 69.2, the corporation shall attach to the notice of the AGM, not that word, but annual general meeting, a copy of the financial statements and the auditor's report. So under the Act, if you're not having your AGM right away and within the 6 months, you're delaying because of COVID, you don't have to send out the financial statements. So you don't have to under the Act, but however, there's a long day before the AGM's going to take place. You might want to take some steps. So sending the statements on its own to everybody might be expensive, but you might want to consider advising owners that the financial statements are available and perhaps provide a few highlights of the financial results. If you don't tell them about a few of the highlights in the financial statements, I would expect you'd probably get a lot of requests. So you can tell them, you know, you're close to budget or the operating fund is so much. So I would consider letting the owners know that it's available if you have a newsletter or something of the like, just an electronic newsletter. Just let them know that the statements are available and maybe providing a few highlights.
Thanks, Blair. And we had another question that came in about, well, several questions that we're going to combine into one. Should condos be opening their pools, their outdoor tennis courts, their gardens, their docks, their marinas? We've covered some of this in our previous webinars. I see Maria shaking her head. Patricia, do you want to take that question? Oh, you're muted. There you
Sorry.
go. In 2 minutes or less, should we be doing this?
Should we do, sorry, I couldn't hear you because the phone went off. Could you just say it?
Sorry. Okay, I'll repeat the question. I think it'll take 2 seconds to answer it, but the question is, should condos be opening their pools, outdoor tennis courts, gardens, docks, marinas?
Absolutely not.
I can't believe we're still asking this question.
Nothing that creates anything social. Docks are not permitted to be open. Marinas are closed unless they provide essential services to certain types of boats. So no tennis courts, no pools, none of that until we actually get the green light to go ahead. Anything that encourages no social distancing and potentially transmission of the virus, it's not going to help crush the curve.
Exactly. Blair, there's a question that just came in following up to your question. To meet the June 1st tax remittance, do the owners need to review the audited financial before the forms are remitted?
So June 1 tax remittance, I'm not actually sure what sort of tax remittance that would be for. Is that for income tax or property tax? I don't think you'd need the audited financials before you'd be doing any tax remittances or filings that I'm aware of.
Okay, thanks, Blair.
And I'm assuming this is residential as well.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, that's we've come to the end of webinar number 4. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. If you have any questions that you want answered at next week's webinar, please send them to admin@ccihuronia.com. We're going to try and reach them if we can in the next session, or make it a topic that somebody will talk about. If you've sent your questions in the chat, you don't need to resend them. We'll be reviewing that chat line. Also, CCI Huronia is trying to collect tips and tricks on how to survive COVID-19 in the condo context. So if you have any tips or tricks, please send it to admin@ccihuronia.com. Let us know where the tip and trick is coming from, because we want to make sure we acknowledge the contributor. We'll be distributing those tips and tricks at a later date once we've got them all collected. Just a reminder that tonight's webinar has been recorded, and the recording will be posted on our website, hopefully within the next 48 hours. And I want to give a shout out again to CCI Golden Horseshoe. and CCI Eastern Ontario, because they've got webinars coming up this week as well. Eastern Ontario has a webinar from 5 to 6 p.m. on Thursday, April 16th. And they're going to be having Dr. Vera Etches, who is the Medical Officer of Health for the Ottawa Public Health Unit, speak. Also, and you can go to the CCI Eastern Ontario website, which is cci-easternontario.ca to register. Golden Horseshoe is having a webinar later that evening on April 16th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Called Living in the Twilight Zone in Your Condo. They're going to be answering questions about living in this new reality that we're facing. So please go to the CCI Golden Horseshoe website, cci-ghc.ca, and you can register there. I'd like to once again thank all our speakers. Thank you to all our guests tonight. Our next webinar will be held next Tuesday on April 21st at 7 o'clock. You will need to register again. So please go to our website or respond to the e-blast that we send out and register for next week's webinar. And now, until next time, I'm Sonia Hodis. I ask you to be safe, be patient, be kind, and stay home. If everyone does their part to protect not only the essential workers that are still putting their lives on the line by going to work every day, but also those that are medically compromised, we can, as Patricia said, crush the curve. And it seems like it's starting to work. So please, everyone, do your part. And we will see you next week. From the CCI family to your family, wishing you a good week, and see you on April 21st. Thank you, everyone.